Here's the thing. We all need boundaries in our health, work, relationships, and finances. We need boundaries. And I want to make one thing clear. Boundaries aren't there to keep you stuck in a box. Boundaries are there to protect your peace and prevent you from causing unnecessary harm. Setting financial boundaries is especially important because they keep you on the straight and narrow. They keep you focused on doing the things that will help you reach your financial goals. If you struggle with setting boundaries, especially financial ones, you don't want to miss this episode. I'm sharing 6 ways to set financial boundaries that actually stick. As your situation changes, your boundaries change, but always having those limits will keep you moving in the direction of your goals. So, before I get into the 6 ways to set financial boundaries, I want to share with you a time where I failed to have monetary boundaries and it cost me a lot. You likely already know my story. I moved to LA at 18 for college and racked up tens of thousands of dollars in credit card debt trying to keep up with the Joneses. I also thought that accumulating material things made me happy, but in reality, it didn't. I was constantly spending my last few dollars on material things only to be struggling until my next part time paycheck came in and I was working a retail job at the mall. So you can imagine that paycheck really wasn't much. Failing to have boundaries on my spending honestly took years to overcome, but that shouldn't be surprising because it took years and years of that behavior. So, of course, it's going to take time to undo that bad behavior. But I honestly do not regret that time in my life because it taught me so much about myself, about money, about our impulses and our emotions and how that impacts our decisions with money. But I am very proud to say I am much more mindful with my spending now, and I always make sure that any spending I do is in line with my budget. I'm not always perfect, but I am intentional, and I think that has contributed greatly to the success I've seen. Okay, another thing I want to cover before we get into the 6 ways to set financial boundaries is I want to just spend a little bit of time talking about what financial boundaries actually are. So, boundaries, like I mentioned earlier, impact every area of our life in a good way. But boundaries, especially financial ones, are basically limits that you create to manage how you spend, how you save, how you give, how you invest, and how you share your money. And here's why they are essential. Like my story, my situation, failing to set financial boundaries specifically for spending for me personally, that will leave you broke. It will leave you in debt. It will leave you with no savings and it will leave you almost getting evicted, just like it left me. And ultimately, it will leave you financially behind. When you do kind of reach your light bulb moment and realize you need to turn things around, you're going to be 10 steps behind because you didn't have those financial boundaries. So that's why they are essential. And, you may also feel more stress, more anxiety, more worry than you need to when you cross those financial boundaries. So those boundaries are almost there to give you like a radar for, hey, if you cross this boundary, you're going to be stressed out, you're going to be negative, it's not going to feel good. So, here are some examples of situations where boundaries come into play, specifically financial ones. So, lending money to your friends or family, set a boundary around lending money. Will you always look at it as a gift or will you make sure that a contract is signed? What boundaries will you have around that? Another boundary is sticking to a monthly spending limit. So, your budget in and of itself is almost a financial boundary because we should be sticking to the budget, and the budget should explain how much you should be spending on a monthly basis. And then another example is saying no to events or purchases or things that just don't align with your goals. So if you have those financial boundaries set and you know what your financial goals are, you can actually say no to things that don't help you get closer to your goals. Okay, so that's why financial boundaries are important. Let's talk about the 6 ways to actually set financial boundaries and stick to them. So, first one is know your goals. You cannot set boundaries if you do not know what you're protecting. Okay. And our goals are what we're protecting. When you know what you're working towards, whether it's paying off debt, buying a house, traveling more, starting a business, or just having some form of savings, you naturally create limits around how you use your money so that you can ultimately keep the focus on reaching whatever you're working towards. So, having those financial goals almost gives you a path, and anything that's not on that path, you want to stay away from because it's not going to help you reach your goals. And I'll also say that boundaries become so much easier to set and to stick to when you have a clear destination of where you want to go financially. So, a good rule of thumb to follow is that your boundaries should be rooted in why. Why are you managing your money in the first place? Why is it so important that you stick to your budget? Why is it important that you save? And those goals are usually created with a why in mind. So make sure you spend some time setting and reviewing your financial goals, and make it a point to look at those goals daily or weekly just so that they stay top of mind. I think this will really help keep you focused on the things you need to be doing with your money so that you can reach your goals. So, definitely know your financial goals. That way, any boundaries you set will be in line with those goals. Okay, the next way to set financial boundaries and stick to them is to be honest about what you can afford. And I know this is going to sound a bit harsh, but I promise you it is coming from a good place. Stop people pleasing with your money, even if the person you are pleasing is yourself. And I know, you probably don't want to hear that, but we all need to hear it. I was actually having a conversation with a coaching client just yesterday on our call, and she really had the realization that she spends her money to her detriment to, keep her family happy. Like, she loves her family and she wants them to feel that love, but she's not in a position to spend extra, but she finds herself constantly spending extra. So, this applies to so many people. Again, if you're people pleasing someone else or yourself, we need to stop because you've got to be honest about what you can afford to spend. It's so easy to just feel the need to keep up with like social plans, expectations from our family, or even just trends and, social media or society in general. But if your bank account can't afford it, it is not worth it. And as much as you don't want to disappoint yourself for the people in your life, you have to be honest about your situation. Going deeper into debt or completely wiping out your savings because you're afraid to say no, or you don't want to say no, or you don't want to upset people will do so much more harm than good. I promise you, future you will be picking up the slack for present you decisions. Okay. Trust me, I do know how hard it is. I was that girl who spent her last dollar on an outfit for a girls' night out. And so I was people pleasing myself, not other people. But I couldn't afford it. And it took me years to get out of the financial hole that those decisions created for me. And like I said, sadly, it was all about pleasing myself. But maybe for you, it's about pleasing your family or your partner or your kids or your friends. I tell my clients who struggle with this that you really can't help anyone else until you help yourself. Like, how can you fill someone else's cup up when your cup is empty? It just doesn't work. So, if you struggle with this, I want you to practice affirmations, say phrases like, that's not in my budget right now, or I'm focusing on other goals. So, get comfortable with, affirmation statements and phrases like that. So, when somebody asks for something that truly is not in your budget, you already know what to say. That is not in my budget right now, or I'm currently focusing on other goals right now, but maybe later. And, you can also offer up alternative solutions. So maybe instead of, always going out to brunch with your girlfriends, you can suggest like a brunch at home. Everybody bring a dish. At the end of the day, it really comes back to being financially honest with yourself and knowing what you can afford and saying no to the things you can't. And I do think that being financially honest with yourself is a form of self respect. I mean, you don't owe anyone an explanation for not overspending. So set that boundary, it'll be very impactful for you. Okay, the next way to set financial boundaries and stick to them is to create a fun money budget. So, boundaries, especially within our budget, don't mean that you can't have fun, don't mean that you can't enjoy your life, don't mean that you can't indulge in the things that truly matter to you. It just means you're being intentional. So I want you to create a fun money, spending limit in your budget. Give yourself permission to spend within the limits of that budget and that number so you don't feel burnt out. You don't feel resentful or stressed or wondering like what all of this is for. Depriving yourself leads to splurging, it leads to rebellion. And usually that rebellion is in the form of extreme overspending. Don't even let yourself get to that point. I promise you, it's not worth it. Instead, make sure you have fun money factored into your budget. And I know I talk about this a lot on the podcast, but that's because it truly is a key component for success with your money. Now, you may not be able to give yourself all the money in the world for you to have fun with, right? Like maybe your budget doesn't allow for hundreds of dollars for fun. That's okay. It's temporary, right? It's not always going to be this way, but give yourself something, whatever you can afford, give yourself that room to enjoy life with. And I promise you, it'll help you feel better about actually sticking to the budget and any other financial boundaries that you set. Okay, so this next one I talked about a little bit earlier, but I think it's important that we dive deeper because this impacts so many people. So, the next way to set financial boundaries and stick to them is to have a policy in place for lending or gifting money. So, remember how I said earlier you really can't help others until you help yourself? Well, when you lend money that you don't actually have to lend, you're hurting everyone involved, yourself included, okay? So lending money, especially to people you care about, can turn to tension quickly if the expectations aren't clear, okay? So here's the thing, no judgment on what your personal policy for loaning money is, okay? Like whatever you decide, stick to it, that's your boundary, that is it. But whatever that policy is, make sure it's set in stone, okay? So again, whether you decide that you're always going to decline loaning money, like it doesn't matter who asks, you're always going to say no, that's your policy. Whatever that is, stick to it. Or maybe your policy is to kind of take the approach of if you do end up lending money, you're just going to look at it as a gift every time, you loan it. If that's your policy, make sure you're always sticking to it. The point is to just know your stance, know where you stand when it comes to lending or gifting money so you don't have to make emotional or rushed decisions. Like have this already thought out. That way, when the situation comes up, you know exactly how to move. So maybe your policy is, again, to look at every single loan as a gift. When someone asks you for a loan and you're actually considering loaning it to them, maybe your response is, hey, I don't lend money, but I'm happy to help you with what I can give you, right? Whatever that number is. Again, having that policy in place ahead of time avoids the tension, the conflict, the emotions, the rushed decisions. So it also helps you avoid overextending yourself, right? And getting into those awkward situations with friends or family. So make sure you know your policy. And if you think that you could potentially forget what your policy or boundary is around lending or gifting money, just jot it down in your notes app. And that way, like whenever the situation arises, you can refer to it and know your stance. All right, moving on to the next one. Use tools and automations to help you protect your boundaries. So, AI, technology, it is all here to stay. And in fact, I'm sure it's going to change even more significantly as time goes by. So, we may as well use it to our own advantage, right? Tools and automations like automatic savings transfers or budget and spending alerts or, tracking for your spending, online bill pay, account alerts for certain balance amounts. Like all of these things are designed to help you stay on top of your finances and ultimately protect your boundaries with money. It's almost like different levels, right? Like if you have an account alert set up to shoot you a text message or a notification when your balance hits under $100, that's a form of protection, right? Oh, my account is under 100 or I'm like right there at the mark. So like no more spending. So use these tools and systems to your advantage. And let me just say, when systems are in place, you are so much less likely to give in to impulse or guilt. And this is because systems really help you create that structure and just automatically removes that temptation from your life. Almost like one less thing to worry about, which I don't know about you, but anytime I can like offload or take something off my plate so I don't have to think about it, don't have to worry about it, I am all for it. So, if you currently don't have any automatic savings transfers or automatic investment transfers, automatic bill pay, or even account alerts set up, get started now. I recommend at least starting with one, seeing how it works, and move on to some of the other automatic things that are available to you. You will be amazed at how much time and mental space you save when those things are done for you. All right, the final way to set financial boundaries and stick to them is to communicate your boundaries clearly. So, when you establish your financial boundaries, please do not be afraid to communicate them to your friends, your family, your partner, even your coworkers if you guys like to go out a lot. Like, let people know what your limits are so they don't assume, right? Because how would they know if you don't tell them? If you don't tell them that you are trying to save for a house or that you're trying to pay off debt, how would they know? And if the things that you guys always do together involve spending money, why would they act any different, right? So don't be afraid to communicate your boundaries. And I do know this can be hard or even scary if you're not really used to speaking up, but it's so important to just be upfront. And this can really help you avoid hurting people's feelings. It can help you avoid misunderstandings with communication, in the future. So here's an example. If you are constantly invited on girls' trips, maybe your boundary is you're only doing one big trip a year, right? So that is what you share. I'm only doing one big trip this year. So, what are our options? Okay, this is the trip I'm going to do. Or maybe if you're always invited to brunch, you can say, hey, I've got a strict budget right now, so I'm skipping brunches for the next quarter, right? Communicate that. And when people know, they'll hopefully respect that. And if they don't, that's a different issue we got to solve for. But when you are communicating your boundaries, it's best to use I statements. Okay. So using a statement with I, it really makes it about your decision and not so much someone else's actions or opinions. So I'm skipping the girls' trips this year to focus on saving for a down payment, but I'll definitely be down for the next one. It makes it about you and your goals. It has nothing to do with what they're planning. And if you do find that people are giving you like a hard time about your stance, I would challenge you to really look at the relationship and just make sure that it's serving both parties as it should be. So, boundaries can feel hard at first, especially if you are not used to setting them or sticking to them, or if you're used to overgiving or overspending. But they do get easier with practice, and the peace you gain from setting boundaries and sticking to them is truly priceless. And it's okay if people don't understand right away. I think the right people will respect your boundaries, but only if you respect them first. So here's to setting financial boundaries and sticking to them. And I do want to quickly mention that we are getting ready to have our annual summer savings challenge. It's a free 4-week savings challenge. If you want to join, I'm going to add the link to the show notes. So I hope to see you there.